All right, welcome back to Wrestling Retold and Relive with Richie Mars. I, of course, am your humble, gracious host, Richie Mars. Thank you so much for clicking, for listening, and thank you for joining me on this lovely journey here that we did last week with SummerSlam 1997. The crazy twists and turns that main event took. I gotta calm down a little bit. I need to probably sit back, watch some reality TV. Total Divas is on Peacock. I'm not getting sponsored to say that, but maybe I'll watch a couple episodes because right around this episode's release, Total Divas is heading up their anniversary. And I can't think of a better time to talk about the Bella Twins than now because that is a good segue. But I couldn't do this alone. No, no. Like the Bella Twins, I need a partner in crime. I need somebody to bounce off of creatively. So that is why I've chosen my good, dear friend, Ebbi from the Familia. Ebbi, how are we doing here today?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing phenomenal now that you're here. So, uh, you chose this topic, if I remember correctly.
I did.
So, why choose the Bella Twins topic?
I feel like the Bella twins are so incredibly underrated, and not underrated in the traditional sense of they're consistently looked over in the business. I feel as if they are looked over by the IWC and by the wrestling fan base. I feel like everything that the Bella twins have gotten in the business has been well deserved
Mhm.
and 100% earned. And I just want to give my perspective. Maybe it'll change some minds, maybe it won't, but I gotta try.
And again, that's all we can ask for different perspectives in wrestling and hearing each other out, even if we don't fully agree or agree totally. It's like, again, people are going to be stuck in their ways. And if they hear you out, they hear you out. And if they don't, they don't. And what I'm seeing right here, just doing my Total Divas, Total Bellas research. Let's see. Total Divas has 9 seasons to its name from 2013 to 2019. That's right. I could read. And then we also have a Total Bellas as well, the spinoff. They were so successful at Total Divas, they went to Total Bellas as well. So they were a big success within the reality TV realm. With that being said, we had a lot of reality TV where it's like a bunch of people just kind of hanging out, drinking wine. My gosh, the amount of wine was in every shot. I was just like, oh, geez, these these people our, their tolerance is very high to be this every day. Um, but with all like the reality TV shows at the time, the Kardashians, you had like different celebrity shows at the time, and with the Bellas kind of heading this reality show opportunity, do you think it's a case of one of those things where it's something different from like a WWE product? It's more quote unquote behind the scenes. We're seeing these quote real lives of these superstars. Do you think because it was new and it was focusing on a division that wasn't necessarily getting that focus, do you think that caused a bunch of the backlash the Bellas got? Or do you think it's just kind of a mix of us seeing them on the show and equating that to their real life personas?
Um, I think it's a mixture. Of course, like I do think a lot of the backlash that the Bella twins got um had to do with the fact that they were on a reality show.
Hmm.
Um as real as a reality show can get.
Hmm.
But I think a lot of it also had to do with the fact that the Bellas were just pretty. And they came from the era of women's wrestling where you only had to be pretty.
Hmm.
You didn't really have to have the in-ring technical skill. You didn't have to have really any sort of athleticism.
Hmm.
You just had to exist and be a pretty face and have a cute hairdo, and they were willing to throw you TV time.
Hmm.
Not a lot of TV time, but a bit of TV time. And I think for a lot of wrestling fans, anyone involved in that era of wrestling that has not been consistently involved, women speaking, um all the way through that era of wrestling into the current era of wrestling. I think they all kind of get crapped on a little bit.
Hmm.
It's like, you were just a pretty face. You made no meaningful contributions to the business. But I definitely don't think that that is the case with Nikki and Brie.
Hmm. And with Nikki and Brie, let's just go over a couple of their storylines prior to becoming, the total divas of that
Mhm.
divas division. Because their first run, they both earned a divas championship. Bree's was, of course, longer than Nikki's at the time because they only held it for a week, and then they got quote unquote fired by Eve Torres after dropping it to Layla. But with their storylines, their first main one was Nikki would be under the ring, and Brie would be the one that was on television, where they would do twin magic, and then Nikki would come in, be fresh as a daisy, roll their opponents up 1, 2, 3, and that was pretty much the crux of their story until they were found out they're twins, which I thought was a pretty cool way to introduce themselves onto the roster because we never really had a set of female twins before. We had twins in wrestling like the Basham brothers, even though they weren't really twins, but they kind of portrayed them to be twins. And we had brothers in wrestling before that, but this is the first time there was a twin dynamic. And it made them different in this era, in that now it's like you have double the shot of being on television because you're something different. The caveat is you're not going to be looked at as your own individual persona. And we get that with two of their major storylines at that time, which one was, I believe, Brie was with the Colognes, Carlito and Primo, and then Nikki was with The Miz and John Morrison. Nikki was always the heel in every storyline, which made which made me laugh because they say in their book that Nikki's like the heel in real life compared to Brie. And then you got Team Teddy and Team Johnny, which they split up with that whole WrestleMania diversion. Do you think the Bellas, at least at this point in time, were more of a gimmick rather than characters on the show at this point?
I, I'd say I think the Bellas were probably at that point of time more of a gimmick
Mhm.
than characters of the show. Really, in most of their storylines predating their title reigns, they were never really the main character of what was going
Mhm.
on. And even with Nikki's first title reign, she wasn't really the main character of what was going on. No one was really here to see the Bellas. They just added a little extra oomph to the story because sisters being at odds is catty and entertaining. But when you add the fact to, okay, they're identical twin sisters who are at odds, who have a difference in opinions, it becomes even more catty and even more dramatic and even more entertaining. But they themselves weren't the focus
Mhm.
of what the product that was being delivered to us
Mhm.
was.
And let's go on to one storyline around this time where they were the focus on, and that was the Daniel Bryan storyline. Now, this is not the Daniel Bryan, the yes guy. This was brand new off of the NXT show, Daniel Bryan, United States champion, and the Bella twins ushering him out to the ring. And they had a bet on who can take Daniel Bryan's V card first. Now, if you don't know what a V card is, I ain't going to explain it on here. That's a whole different show for a different podcast. That is not this one. But that is exactly what the storyline is, and it was very interesting because it was a PG product, at this time. But how they expanded on the V card was they were betting on who liked who, or who did Brian like out of the two of them, and of course. The grand reveal is Daniel Bryan was dating Gail Kim in storyline, and Gail Kim was not doing anything, and she was criminally underrated during her second stint in WWE. But again, different thing, different podcast. And when they asked Brian if he had, he was a virgin, before they could say virgin, Brian said, "Oh no, vegan. Yes, I'm totally a vegan." Because that was the story at the time, because he was a vegan. So that was their heel turn, and I don't know about you, but this is kind of like the first storyline where it's like, oh, like where Sister's like, oh, which one of us is gonna sleep with them first? And then it turns out he's dating another girl as the big twist. And again, this story was a lot like the other diva stories at this time. They would have like plot points, but they wouldn't have like a finish to this story. You know, they were either wrapped
Yeah.
up in Superstars, main event, and even when you held the Divas Championship, you weren't necessarily the focal point of the show because the Divas division itself wasn't the focal point. So when you're fighting on just to get television time, and one of the many ways that the Bellas was on television were the guest host eras, where they would be ushering the guest host around. Do you think that was a pivotal point in their careers? Because even though they're not saying anything or any characters being developed, they're still constantly on TV at this point to get some more face time. Do you think that helped with the Bellas, or do you think that kind of detracted them of just kind of being one note?
Um, I think I think to someone who is willing to analyze wrestling as more than just wrestling, yes, I think it was a pivotal point in the Bellas' careers. It it really drove home the fact that they could be more than just a pretty face. They're actually entertaining.
Mhm.
They're decently smart, even though a lot of people make the, two girls, one brain joke about them. Like, these girls are decently smart. They're decently witty. They're funny. They can actually do things to draw in people's attention. Now, to someone who doesn't really look deeper into wrestling than more than just something to watch on TV to pass the time, sure, it's okay. It's pretty girls. Like, valeting people around the backstage where the person who they're showing around is the guest host and they're really the purpose, like, for why we're paying attention to this product, when it's really not. It's they were picked for a reason to do this.
Mhm.
They were chosen to do this. It could have been other women on the roster. There are other pretty faces on the roster. If it was just for the purpose of a pretty face, then it wouldn't have been them so frequently. It would have been them a week, maybe a Maurice one week, maybe a Mickey James another week. Like, it they had options to choose from. Um so yeah, I definitely think it was a pivotal point. I think it was an attempt for us to get to know Nikki and Brie and to kind of see the different dynamics of their personalities, which I think was a huge part of why they wrote their book and why they titled it Incomparable. Because even like when watching Total Divas, you get to know that Nikki and Brie are two completely different people.
Mhm.
They like literally night and day.
Yeah.
Night and day. They like different things. They like if we look at the type of spouses that they have chosen, like, these girls are two completely different people. And I think people often forget that when not only when you're dealing with twins, but when you're dealing with siblings in general. Even I have the same issue with people like comparing me to my sister, and it's like, me and my sister are nothing alike. Not only are we nothing alike, personality wise, we're 10 and a half years apart in age. Like, there's no reason to compare me to my sister. We have the same face, that's about it. But, like, and I can imagine it being twins, like Nikki and Brie are. Like, they they're genuinely polar opposites when we talk about personality archetypes. And I think that that was an opportunity to showcase that. And those who get it, and those who don't, don't.
And let's talk about those two different personas in Nikki and
Hmm.
Brie and how different they are from each other, because they go into it, in their book and in their podcast, and then of course in Total Divas as well, with Brie being the more reserved one, Nikki being the more of the party girl. And even Daniel Bryan in his book, he said that he was attracted to Brie because she would be on WWE.com and she had like a nature blog, and she really cared about nature and environment stuff. While Nikki was more of the wild child of the two. So, you looking from like a fan's perspective of Nikki and Brie on Total Divas, whether it's the show, whether it's Total Bellas, what is how would you describe for a person that's watching the show for the first time? How would you explain the dynamic between Brie and Nikki and their differences?
Um, I wouldn't even say that Nikki is necessarily the wild child. I think Nikki is just about having fun. She's that person who wants to make the most of every single moment in her life. She wants to make every single day a day to remember. And she not only does she wants to make every single day a day to remember, she wants to leave her mark on every single day. Um, whereas Brie is very much so a carefree, go with the flow type of person. She doesn't mind being seen. She doesn't mind being heard, but at the same time, she is at peace with not being seen or heard. And those are two completely different dynamics. It's not it's something very common that you see in sibling groups, but that completely different dynamics, it's not something that you see often in identical twins. And I think I think it's something really interesting, and it's a really beautiful thing because it's very common with twins, especially twin girls, for them to have identity issues growing up because they are so much alike. And I know they've even talked about their personal identity issues, and but I think it's a lot easier for them to work through because there's such a difference between who they are as people. They're really night and day as people, and the fact that they were able to find their individuality, I think that's an amazing thing.
And do you think finding the individuality happened in WWE? What point did you think that occurred, if at all, on WWE television? And if not, when did you first go like, all right, this is the difference between the two, and I get what Nikki's about, I get what Bree's about.
Oh, I immediately noticed the difference from that moment when Nikki and Brie were both pulled out from up under the ring at different sides, like their reactions. And of course, we know wrestling is scripted, but their reactions to the rest of the world discovering their secret was completely different. And I feel like that immediately showcased who they were as people. Whereas Brie was kind of like quiet and shy, and it's like, ooh, I got in trouble type of reaction to this. Nikki was in it. She was 100% in the moment. And it was very much so like, aha, ha, we've been pulling this over on you for so long type of facial expression. Um, I think that the differences in who they are as people were there immediately. And you just needed to know what to look for.
And they would leave WWE again. They would leave in 2011, 2012. I believe it was somewhere around there. So they left around.
Somewhere on there.
So
I think 2012,
yep,
2013.
2012, and then they came back to the road to WrestleMania 29, 2013. Okay, that's where the timeline is. and they came back as partners to Team Rhodes Scholars, which is Cody Rhodes
Mm-hmm.
and Damian Sandow. And it was like a nice little surprise because during this time of the Divas era, there was a lot of people would win the Divas Championship and then leave because
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty much how it would go for the test of time for a while. They would win the Divas Championship, then leave because what else is there to do? Because there's only one championship. You'll get your Divas run, and then you'll just kind of like be back on the card. You'll do like a swimsuit battle royal. You'll do like a bikini contest. Like you'll do all these different things that WWE was known for at the time. A lumberjill match. You know, all these different gimmick matches that were specified for the Divas to try to get them as much screen time as possible, even though it wasn't really the best way to promote your division as a serious television draw. So they came back, you know, partnered Team Road Scholars against tons of Funk, Brodus Clay, and Lord Tenzai with the Funkadactyls, Naomi and Cameron. And their WrestleMania match gets cut due to the length of the show already running long. And there are a couple theories about this. One was this match was purposely canceled off WrestleMania to make it a plot line for the Total Divas reality show. And then there was CM Punk and Undertaker's match just went too long. Now, if this is the first time you heard any of these theories, digest them a little bit. And I want to know, do you think the theory holds credence that this WrestleMania match was made and then canceled just to promote the Total Divas show?
I think it was a mixture of all three things. Because three things can be true at once. I think they thought, okay, Punk and Taker went a little bit over, was longer than what it was supposed to be. This is probably the least interesting match on the card. Thinking about, where I feel by that point women's wrestling was headed. These are not the four women that I would put on a card at that time. Also, all four of them are on this reality show, so it's gonna give a plot line for the season, so why not? It's one of those things that's like, it's a solution to all of our problems. And the problem that isn't even a problem yet. So why not?
So,
plus, it was at a time where, again, women's wrestling really wasn't important to people at that time.
Yeah, to put that in perspective, the Divas champion Caitlyn, I believe, wasn't on the card, and AJ was managing Dolph and Big E against a tag team championship match against Team Hell No of Daniel Bryan and Kane, which is really funny because they kind of mimicked the spot from the year prior with Bryan kissing AJ, but it was Dolph kissing AJ, and then Bryan kicked Dolph in the head, and Dolph, you know how Dolph does this wild sell, and he sold it like he was knocked out. So again, pretty solid all around. And Daniel Bryan was dating Brie at this time, and Nikki was dating, you know, some guy. He was the face of the company, movie star now, Peacemaker. He was dating, God, what is his name?
I can never see him.
Yeah,
can you?
Can't remember. Can't see him. John Cena. All right, let's call him John. So they're dating those two stars at the time. Now Bryan, he's on his way up the rankings of WWE. John Cena is already there, and the popular theory, which is, I wouldn't say backed up, but you watch the television show and you can see how people are placed, is that Nikki Bella and Brie Bella are only promoted as they were promoted because of who they were dating. Now, I will say, dating some powerful people, it does help your positioning. However, it won't keep your positioning consistent. And that's the main thing. If you're not pulling in that effort or that presence, whether that's on television in WWE or reality of Total Divas, if you're failing in those accords, that will only get you so far. And I will say right here on this show, because it's my show, my rules, that they more than held up their end of the bargain, if that was the case of their positioning.
Mhm.
The again, dating stars like John Cena, Daniel Bryan definitely helped, but it didn't necessarily define them as workers, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Um, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I don't think it mattered who they dated at all. I think, at least from my perspective, the Bella twins were always, from the beginning, groomed to be the face of the Divas division.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you think about what was going on in the Divas division at the time, they weren't really getting much screen time. They were promoted more as eye candy rather than technical wrestling talent. Um, Whereas where we are now, um, where there has been this evolution in women's wrestling and women's wrestling around the world and every promotion that you can think of, it's the best where it's ever been. I don't think that there was anyone better suited to be the face of that transition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you think about the beginning of their career, and I've said it a million times in our lives with the rest of the familia, if you think about the beginning of their careers, from their debut to their last match, and we're going to call it a pseudo retirement, because they have both expressed a recent desire to get back in the ring at some point. Their in-ring technical skill grew leaps and bounds. Their promo cutting ability grew leaps and bounds. Um, there was no one better suited to facilitate that transition in women's wrestling than the Bella
Mm-hmm.
Twins. Um, they had it all. They were decent enough in-ring competitors. They were decent enough promo cutters. They're beautiful. Like, who else are we going to say that was in the company for as long as they were presents a package like that?
Mm-hmm.
Plus, there's two of them. There's two of them.
Mm-hmm.
Come on. Like, who else? Who are our other options for like that long of tenure with the company? And that alone, that long of tenure with the company, who do we have? Natalia and Tamina. Okay, well then we have to bring in promo cutting ability.
And I think with all of that, because if you've watched wrestling long enough, you know when they talk about women's wrestling, it's like it's Trish, Lita, and then there's this whole gap of they won't mention any of the other stars, and then it will hop to AJ Lee, the Bellas, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like them specifically, AJ and the Bellas, they were for the Divas division at the time kind of like a prologue to what the current women's wrestling uh, atmosphere in WWE eventually became. A
Mm-hmm.
little bit bare bones in comparison, but they were necessary to try things with, because with AJ Lee, she was the first diva since the Attitude Era, since Lita and Trish and the Ruthless Aggression. I apologize, someone would have corrected me if I didn't correct it. To end and close Raw, the main show. And then with the Bellas, they were the first ones to actually get consistent television time once Total Divas was on the air. Now, I think
Yeah.
some of the cross brand promotion when they did Total Divas versus the Other Girls, which was actually their brand name for Survivor Series, might have been a smidge lazy, but it was giving them
Yeah.
consistent television time. And
Yeah.
even though traditional wrestling fans won't like the Total Divas show, there is another audience out there that does appreciate the drama aspect of what the Total Divas show is. There are people who know who Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson is, only because of that show, and that is always wild to me. But it's just like that is just that's just the facts.
Something even wilder. I know people who only know who John Cena is because of Total Bellas
which is
and Total
which
Divas.
is even
It's crazy.
hilarious. And
Crazy.
and the thing is with like Total Divas, like I would occasionally watch it because I'm like, oh, it'll be pretty cool to see these wrestlers in a relaxed like setting. And I think that was almost like the precursor to all the shows we have now with wrestlers, like an Up Up Down Down, like
Hmm.
shows like that. And it, even though reality TV is, scripted, Daniel Bryan was asked about it. He said he hated filming reality TV because they'd always have to change clothes on filming days and pretend it was a different day during filming. And I'm just like, oof, that doesn't sound fun. But you have Nikki and Brie, and they're put in a position to be at the forefront of this WWE project. And if it doesn't succeed, then the burden falls on them. Then
Hmm.
it's going to be more of the same. But the show was a big success, so much so that they had Total Bellas, the spinoff. And there were a lot of things that were revealed there, like John Cena's OCD, Daniel Bryan going through retirement. So you got these snippets of like the wrestlers that we like watching on television, but you got more expansive on the Brie and Nikki dynamic with their families. Now, do you think the show overall kind of gave them, I don't want to say an unfair advantage, but an advantage into their booking in the sense that now that they have this extra thing that you could watch and catch up on, people would start relating to Nikki and Brie more than they would the other women.
I think it gave them an unfair advantage because if you look at the other women who were on the show, they did not amount. They did not occupy the same space within the company that Brie and Nikki did.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't. We saw what happened with Eva Marie's most recent run in WWE. Total Divas did her no favors. If anything, that woman was consistently put down because of the very scripted things that were happening on Total Divas. Natty has taken a back seat in the women's division for most of her career. And she was on Total Divas from day one. JoJo, she got bumped from the wrestling roster, and they said, "Homegirl, go announce or something, because this is not working for you." Brie and Nikki occupied the space within the company that they occupied because they earned it,
Mm.
because they put in the work, because they got better, and because they didn't take the amount of time to get better that other people did. Um, Eva Marie, even though her in-ring technical skill, the improvement came, it didn't happen nearly as quick as it did for Nikki and Brie. And not necessarily to say that that's her fault. Um, she wasn't forced to grow before they decided that, hey, you need to do something a little bit better. You need to deliver a different product. And when they decided that, they made all the accommodations in the world for her, and it still didn't really go much of anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the same thing goes with Naomi, like athletically gifted, one of the most athletically gifted women to ever step foot into a WWE ring, easily. Um, but she never really had. She had her moment at Mania that year, but besides that, like in her run with the tag titles with Sasha Banks, now Mercedes Moné, but that was very short lived, and that came to an abrupt and unfortunate end. Um, they were never given the opportunities that the Bellas were given, and I think that's because the Bellas were more of a well-rounded talent. I don't think Total Divas gave them any leg up. And if it did give them a leg up, it's because they earned it with the product that they were giving on Total Divas. There were times where I was watching episodes of Total Divas, like, because I would record it. I'd never watch things in real time because I hate commercials. There were times where I would literally like fast forward a Naomi storyline or a Cameron storyline to figure out what was going on with the Bellas, because I was that interested. I was that invested. And that's because of the product that they were bringing forth. That's because of the story that they were telling and how they were telling the story. Um, so, like, if Total Divas did give them a leg up, that's because they were doing the darn thing on Total Divas, not because they were favorited. If anything, I would say, like, Total Divas maybe hindered them a bit, because I, quite frankly, women's division aside, the Divas division aside, I didn't like the way that I was seeing my hero, who is John Cena, being portrayed on television in front of me. Like, sometimes I would quite literally turn the TV off because I'm like, oh, here we go again. Here we go
I'm
again.
just saying, Total Divas John Cena is super based. Like, he
Oh
does
my God.
not care.
Oh my God. When I tell you I've never been able to more easily read neurodivergence off of somebody than with John Cena in that scene where he's telling her about which laundry goes in which basket
Oh,
and which
it's my
laundry goes
favorite.
in the other basket. Um but if anything, like, if anybody is to take away anything that I say about the Bella twins, um regardless if you think that they're good wrestlers, regardless of if you think that they are just eye candy, these girls are dynamic
Mm-hmm.
storytellers.
And going back to that, just by the first season, from my memory alone, because I haven't watched Total Divas in a while. Shocking, I know. It's geared towards me after all. Uh, the storylines I remember the most were Daniel and Bree's engagement or eventual engagement. I'm not sure if that was the first season, but I know that was a big story. The Nikki and John stuff lasted throughout the entirety of the show because
Yeah.
people, whether people like it or not, whether it's sitcoms or reality shows, people like the will they, won't they, will they get together, the marriage, like the conflicts, everything like that, and TJ and Natty's wedding. Like, those
Yeah.
were the only stories I specifically remember. And they were pushing a lot out of Eva Marie too at that time. Like, she was like
Yeah.
specifically like put on that show to be a character, not exactly to
Yeah.
be a wrestler.
It was before she dyed the hair.
And apparently that was a big controversy, which I'm like, yeah, no, it wasn't. Like, there's sometimes I watch a show, I'm like, all right, that's not how that would happen.
Yeah.
And like, I remember reports at the time where they did like a story with Eva Marie and Stephanie McMahon, with Stephanie McMahon giving a talking to Eva Marie for lying about being good at dance to be Fandango's partner.
Yeah.
And
No.
somebody was like, Stephanie would never talk to people if they lied like that. Like, they were like very confused
Yeah.
on that, on how that happened. Even Road Dogg came out on like his podcast and he's like, yeah, like, because he got heat for talking to Paige, or Saraya now, about missing
Yeah.
shows and being unprofessional, and he got bombarded on Twitter. He's like, guys, it's just an entertainment show. Just chill out a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think it has to do with that. It like I said, it didn't hurt that majority of their stories, the Bellas, were with the top guys of the company, but their stories did carry on in that they carried a lot of the narrative of the show. Like, if you were going to do an ensemble show, you have an A plot, a B plot, and a C plot. Usually they would be in the A or B plot more often than not.
Yeah.
There were always like a big chunk of episodes, which, again, if that's what you want to market towards, that's what you market towards. And the Bellas had that attitude about them. But I've been putting this off long enough, because one of the more important stories that we're getting to, that I briefly mentioned with Pat the Wise Man. Shout out Pat the Wise Man. Trauma Buddy for Life, going through the Authority storyline for 3.5 hours. Check it out in the archives. Um,
He promised me he'd listen to this episode. So, hi, Pat.
okay, so Pat, why aren't you here? Anyway, I'm reliving it. So fast forward 2014, the Authority storyline. I'm back here again. Consider this an epilogue to that. Daniel Bryan is injured. Neck surgery. It's not healing correctly. Trying to get back in the ring, and they're trying to prolong it as much as possible. And Stephanie McMahon, one of the heads of the Authority, is threatening to strip Daniel Bryan of the title. But to prolong that even further, Brie Bella said, "You're not firing him because I quit." And then Brie Bella quits. And then she slaps Stephanie McMahon to the shock and awe of the crowd. People are cheering. So Brie Bella quits to save Daniel Bryan from vacating the championship. Only for Daniel Bryan to vacate the championship a couple weeks later because he is not cleared to compete. So, all that aside, this is the start of Brie and Nikki as different individuals. And with them being the center focus on Total Divas at this time, naturally you will translate that into the television product that you're currently using right now. And this is Stephanie McMahon's first singles match, like in WWE, in I think about a decade. I want to
Yeah, it
say,
was a decade at that point, yeah.
and they build it up for SummerSlam, and of course the build up is Brie Bella being assaulted by Stephanie McMahon, and then Stephanie McMahon getting arrested for it, which was I'm just like, okay, here we go. And a writer at the time for WWE, Kevin Eck, I believe his name was, or is, I don't want to say was because he's still alive, said that they wanted to do the whole thing in kayfabe where Stephanie McMahon would, do like the uh, the jail pick thing where it's like they're holding up the sign, front, side, back, and apparently Triple H shot that down because like his reasoning was if they Google it, then people would think that she was actually arrested in real life.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Vince did it like a couple like years later, and I'm just like, it's kind of apropos now, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was like a little funny thing in creative. But to tease the tension even more is Nikki Bella would just keep putting handicap matches against all the divas, get beat up. And then it
Yeah.
fast forward to the Stephanie McMahon Brie Bella match at SummerSlam. But before we get to the finish of this matchup, what is your opinion on this story overall?
I I'm a girl that's all about the heel in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
I was team authority the entire time. Um
Oh,
throughout everything, I was
oh
always team
man.
authority until they started beating up on Nikki, and I'm like, no, no, she's my favorite twin. No. And I was so upset because I'm like, this is not fair. This is so not fair. And I remember vividly, like it haunts my dreams sometimes. Um, that match that Nikki was in, where Brie actually she bought a ticket and she came to see Nikki for her match, and then here comes Stephanie out in the middle of this Bella Twins reunion ringside, this huge hug, this huge embrace, and Stephanie McMahon comes out and she's like, "Oh look, it's Brie, the quitter."
Jeez.
I hear it in my dreams, Richie.
Uh,
I hear the quitter in my
you know what?
dreams.
You hear it in your dreams. I hear it in my nightmares. So there's a little. We
And
both get benefits from that. You sleep, I don't.
man, both of you to I take Ambien, Richie. All of my sleep is forced. Um, but I like I don't it's very rare that a story compels me, truly moves me to feel bad, because in the back of my mind it's always like, oh, this is scripted, it's scripted. It's very rare that a story actually moves me to feel bad for a wrestler, and I genuinely felt bad for Nikki. It's like, oh well, my sister left me, and then it was revealed later on Total Divas that they were actually having, like, in, I think they might have mentioned it in their book if I'm remembering correctly, they were actually having some real, like, sisterly
Mm-hmm.
tensions at that time too, at the point that SummerSlam came up. um and I it was gut wrenching to see that, to see Nikki turn on Brie in that match. It was gut wrenching. But like deep down, I was like, yes, she deserves it.
uh,
She left you. You guys shared a womb together, and she left you to go hang out with her husband at home on the injury shelf. That's messed up. She left you, and like it's so rare that a story genuinely moves me like that. And I guess like maybe just having a sister, because like growing up it was just me and my sister. I don't have any other siblings, so like I get it. I felt it. It struck me to my core, and it's probably why I hear it's Brie, the quitter. It's probably why I hear it in my dreams, because like that's kind of how I felt at that time. It's like, it's Brie, the quitter. You're a quitter. You quit. It got tough and it got hard, so you quit. Um, it it it's probably one of the storylines that occupies the most space in my brain.
I think this is like safe to say that this was the Bellas of any of the Bella twins. This is probably the top story that they've ever been in. With
Yeah.
that being Brie, because you're working with the daughter of the man that owns the company, and you're in a featured match at one of the biggest shows of the year, that being SummerSlam. And I remember that Triple H like came out for the match, and like I think Brie hit him with a drop kick or something on the outside, like a baseball slide.
Yeah.
Uh, but the ending was Nikki turns on Brie, and then Stephanie hits the pedigree, and that's all she wrote. 1, 2, 3. Stephanie wins, and now we're off to the Brie Bella and Nikki Bella feud. Yeah, you said it was gut wrenching for you, right? Like with
It
the whole
was.
thing. My guts were wrenching in a different direction there. It was I was I was not having a good time watching this story, but the story was not tailored for me.
Also have to consider we were watching it from completely different
Which is
perspectives.
true,
This
yeah.
was what, 2013,
Yeah,
2014.
yeah.
So that's what, 10 years ago. That puts you at
I
what,
was 20.
20 years
Yeah, I was
old?
20.
So 10 years ago puts me at 13.
Jesus.
I was a 13-year-old little girl. The wounds of my sister leaving me to go to college were still fresh.
Well, speaking of the wound, we're going to get a lot of different promos of that. And why don't I go to the most infamous one of this entire story, where Nikki and Brie, I don't think this was the Jerry Springer one. I might be wrong, because Jerry Springer did come in for a guest shot of both of
I
them.
think it might have been.
So I I blocked the story out of my mind, so I do not
I
remember
remember
anything
what
of it.
they were wearing. I can tell you that.
One was wearing like a suit, right? Like a pant-like suit.
No,
Okay.
Brie was wearing her Brie mode
Oh,
shirt
now
with
I'm
like
remembering the
some black
song. Oh,
pants. And they were like black jeggings, and Nikki was wearing this black dress that was like just above knee length with spaghetti straps. I remember it so vividly.
mm-hmm. And basically, the finishing line of the entire promo is Nikki wishing Brie died in the wound, and
uh
it's been memed to deceased. It's been memed to death.
ugh,
Uh, I did
brutal.
I didn't enjoy it. because I'm just like, what is this? Because it was confusing because Total Divas would air at around the same period of time. So on the
Mhm.
show, they were acting buddy buddy, like somewhat, but on the show on Raw, where it should be supposed to be suspension of disbelief, they're just feuding, and their feud was kind of mixed because there was like a Nikki Bella championship match against AJ that happened at Night of Champions. She lost that, and then it came to a head at Hell in a Cell, where the loser of the match would be the person's servant for 30 days.
Rewatched that match today, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sure it's fine because, like, again, Nikki and Brie. I think Nikki more so than Brie improved tremendously, and that's not a knock on Brie, but I think Nikki really focused on diversifying her moveset into a more of a powerhouse brawler style compared to Nikki, who was kind of like the fusion of the Divas that time, the Divas style, along with some moves from Brian. And I think
Yeah,
Nikki became more of a different wrestler than Brie herself. Would you agree with that?
I do agree with that, especially when discussing the Hell in a Cell match. Like I said, I rewatched that match today. I actually rewatched it twice, and I tried to view it from different perspectives. First, I watched it from the aspect of criticizing and critiquing technical wrestling skill. It wasn't a great match from that perspective. Um, and then I looked at it from the perspective of the story that's being told. Um, and when you look at it from the perspective of a story that's being told, from what specific story was being told, it's it's a brilliant match. It's a brilliant match. Like, have you ever seen two sisters fight? Because that's exactly what that was. That was two sisters fighting. Like, I'm pretty sure that there's video footage somewhere of like 15-year-old me getting into like this full on brawl cat fight with my 25-year-old sister at the time. And I can tell you, it looks just like that, except without all of like the drop kicks that I think Brie pulled out like 5 or 6 drop kicks
Yeah, that was her
in
go-to.
that match. But like the match was brilliant storytelling. Like that's exactly what it looks like when two sisters fight each other.
Yeah, I could go without listening to Brie mode though. That was
I think everybody can go without listening to Brie mode.
that. Oof.
Interesting factoid: a Brie mode T-shirt is the first ever piece of wrestling merch I've ever owned,
Ah, interesting.
and I was very upset with my
Mhm.
parents because they told me to write a Christmas list, and I put the Bella twins and I put in parentheses Nikki, and I'm like, this is Brie. I wanted a Fearless Nikki shirt.
Yeah.
This says Brie mode. And my mom's like, well, they look the same. And I'm like, they're twins.
I will say with wrestling, I'm not sure about audience reactions. Even this year at WrestleMania, for example, with Jimmy and Jay, I'm not sure if the suspension of disbelief people are comfortable with real life siblings attacking each other. I don't know why,
Yeah,
because
I don't think so. It happens all the time in real life. I don't.
yeah, like Brent Owen is probably the main one that people are. It's like, oh, it was a great match, but that's because kayfabe wasn't really a thing at that point, or people were in the
Yeah.
know. But you go on and you see other brothers fight. Like you had other family fight, like Eddie and Chavo. You had other people fight with trying to remember. I'm not saying Kane and Undertaker because they're not actually brothers. Uh, but like when
The biggest lie of my childhood.
yeah, it's still real to me. Uh, but when you have like situations like that where it's like the story isn't like the main focus or one of the main focuses on the show, and all you have to connect together, it's like, oh, they're related. It just kind of makes, I feel like, a section of the audience uneasy when that happens. And then it's like it's either going to work or it's not going to work. And for, I think, a large majority of the fan base, it didn't work. But that doesn't really matter because the story always moves on anyway. And the story that was
Did.
moved on was Nikki hit uh, Brie, I think it was the rack attack at that point,
Yes.
to win. And Brie is now Nikki's servant for 30 days.
Yeah, it was that right elbow, then the rack attack.
Yeah. Which is and I just realized the Rack Attack name, and then it was Rack Attack 2.0
Yep.
after her neck surgery. Okay, I'm jogging my memory back with Nikki Bella.
You're good.
Yeah, okay,
You're
good.
with it.
All right, good. My memory's not leaving that yet. I do remember at this point they were building up to a Nikki Bella AJ Lee match at Survivor Series,
Yes.
and I remember this because this was the Dolph Ziggler Survivor Series that I love so much, and this match was built on AJ kind of felt like an afterthought, even though she was the champion, because the most of the focus was uh, Nikki kind of like abusing Brie and Brie dressing
Mhm.
as AJ, pinning Nikki at one point when AJ distracted her. Then AJ would dress as Nikki, and Nikki and AJ are kind of like two different sides of the same coin during this
Mhm.
era because AJ was very promoted at the time, and we're getting into that transition. I feel like that last transitional point where the Divas division is going to go from AJ to Nikki, and then after that happens, then it's pretty much we're building and rebranding as the women's division. So this was
Mhm.
like almost the last hurrah. And when this match happened, blink and you miss it. Brie kissed AJ, and then
Call back to the kiss of death.
yep, and then Nikki hit AJ with the forearm. 1, 2, 3, new Divas champion. Now I must say, um, I don't think this made much sense because it's just kind of like I put you through the ringer for 30 days, but you're my sister. I love you. Now we're a team again. So pretty much all the things, the wound, like everything. I'm not gonna let go of that promo because that promo hurt me. Not for like the emotional reasons, but for the scarring reasons because I have to relive it every now and then. Like all that building up, it's like I wish you died in the wound. Like all this other stuff happened, this build, this hatred of sisters, and then it kind of ends with they're back together, which is kind of like how they were before, but now they're on the flip side of the coin. What are your thoughts on it?
Um, you want to know something, Richie? Um,
Am I gonna be happy or sad?
I 100% saw it coming.
Well, yeah, everyone kind of did.
I 100% saw it coming, and I looked at it from more of a perspective, not really the oh, I hate you and I'm abusing you for like the past 30 days, and I told you that I hoped you died in the womb and blah blah blah. I looked at it more from the perspective it's like, haha, we put one over on you. This is kind of the plan the whole time for us to finally get to the top of the women's division, and we did it. Haha, jokes on you. Got you. Now we're laughing in your face. Now I'm champion.
The joke is definitely on me because they put me through a lot of segments, and I still watch to this day.
um, I I knew that that was going to be the finish to that situation. Again, I loved the callback to the kiss of death,
Mm-hmm.
with um AJ and Daniel Bryan and Sheamus at WrestleMania. I loved the callback to that. I think that was amazing. I think it was brilliant storytelling, to be honest, because it kind of brought another moment in WWE history to a full circle moment.
Mm.
Um I always, for some reason, never felt that that storyline was complete until that moment. Um, but yeah, 100% expected it to happen. I didn't think it was going to happen as quick as it did.
Mm.
That match was over as soon as it started.
Yep.
But again, that would only make sense with it being, again, a callback to the previous situation with Daniel Bryan, AJ, and Sheamus. But I enjoyed the storytelling of it all. I it very much so embodied what and how sisters are.
Mm-hmm.
Just truly just how sisters are. I say it all the time, like, I have issues with my sister. Like, we're not the closest. We're nowhere near the closest. I wouldn't even say we're close. But like, that's my sister.
Mm-hmm.
I can argue with my sister, but you can't argue with my sister. I can be mean to my sister, but you can't be mean to my sister because that's my sister. You're gonna have me to deal with. And I think how that match went about was a perfect way to bring that around. Do I feel like it should have been as choppy as it was? No. I don't think it should have ended as quickly as it did. I think that there was more story to tell with this feud post Hell in a Cell as opposed to just the, oh, well, now you have to be my personal assistant for 30 days. I feel like there was more to tell. I would have loved to see, especially seeing how the Bellas grew with their wrestling abilities throughout their career. I would have loved to at least get a Nikki Brie part 2 to see how they grew from that first match together to a second match together. Maybe with the stipulation being on the second match as opposed to the first match. But I don't think there was a better way to end that story, or at least that part of the story. I just feel like they wrapped it up too quickly.
But as we all know, once one story ends, another one begins, and this is the
It sure does.
story of Nikki Bella's longest reigning Divas Championship run. And I want to kind of get your thoughts on it as well, because this reign, I'm not going to say is good or bad. It is historic, and they did showcase Nikki a lot during this time. And the
Mhm.
biggest thing of that is they focused on Nikki a lot, with Brie majority of ringside or being like the henchman of Nikki Bella. Did you think this dynamic worked out well? Did you think they gave Nikki a little bit more of a focus, or did you think that's kind of like par for the course since she was the champion?
Um, I think it was par for the course since she was the champion, and I also think it kind of played a little bit into their real life dynamic a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was watching not too long ago. I forget what he calls it. Kevin Hart, he does a thing with
Oh,
celebrities and they
the
get
yeah,
into
yeah,
the ice
yeah,
bath.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. And Bree's like, yeah, she's 16 minutes older, and you can tell because she's the bossy one.
Mm-hmm.
She's the bossy one. She always tells me what to do. She acts like she's my mom. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think it played a little bit into their real life dynamic, like, even though as real as reality TV can get. Like, you kind of see it play out in Total Bellas and Total Divas a bit.
Sure.
Like, Nikki can get a bit bossy when it comes to Brie and a bit motherly when it comes to Brie. I I think it's just one of those things probably that comes with being the oldest. I don't know a single oldest sibling, especially when the oldest sibling is a girl, who isn't bossy to the rest of the group. But and you can kind of see like Brian gets really frustrated with Nikki when she is being bossy towards Brie.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it more so just played into their real life dynamic. I also think it's just, of course, like as I said before, I think the Bella Twins were slated to be the face of the women's division. And in order for the Bellas to be the face of the women's division, something had to be done to elevate Nikki, because we can't forget that single digit day title reign. That was her first title reign. Brie had a little bit more length on her title reign than Nikki did. And like it very much so felt like, okay, at the time that Brie was champion, Brie was suitable to be champion. So I think a part of it was to elevate Nikki's career to something worth talking about. Especially if they were going to be the face of a Divas division. Do I think they could have done a little bit more with Brie? Absolutely. But like at the end of the day, like if you fast forward to Brie's retirement match, Brie got her moment. Mm-hmm. She got her moment. And I can't say that I'm not pleased. The Bella's incredibly entertaining, as always. And I think Nikki's title reign, I think it perfectly encapsulates, and it was the perfect ending for the Divas division and the Divas title. I don't think a better person could I don't think there was a better person to help usher in the new era of women's wrestling.
Kind of like being that bridge, that gap between the Divas
and
the current era.
Like if you like realistically, like I can't think of a better woman who was in the division at that time to hand over the title to Charlotte Flair. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make sense in my brain to put any other woman there. Whereas we have like Charlotte Flair is this well-rounded, all-around talent. Nikki was, in my opinion, the most well-rounded, all-around talent in the division at that time. Because when you talk about like who is a decent wrestler at that time and just not a bore to watch, we're talking about Nikki, we're talking about Natalya, we're talking about Naomi, we're talking about Paige. And then when we talk about promo cutting ability, that knocks out Natalya, that knocks out Naomi. So we have Nikki and Paige. Paige was already credited to being, her and Emma, to being what really, set off the spark for this women's revolution. So it wouldn't make sense for them to be the handoff person rather than the person who the title was handed to. So that just leaves Nikki Bella in my mind. That's the only person who fits, that embodies what the Divas division was meant to be and can put on a decent match with the person that we are transferring this and like transforming this women's division into.
And especially with the hashtag Give Divas a Chance that was trending when you had Divas matches that were going 45 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minute, maybe even 3 minutes if we're lucky.
Yeah.
And even though it's like a short amount of time, you still have to tell a story within that amount of time. Even though it's like you're either getting 30 seconds, 30 minutes, you're given the time you're given, and then you have to make the best of it. And the fact that the fans were starting to notice, especially around this time, when you had promotions like TNA that were crushing it with their women's division, that you had other
Mhm.
places like Stardom who were crushing it with an all female roster of talent. And now going and fast forwarding into the summer of 2015, where you have Team PCB, you have Team Bad, and then you have Team Bellas with Alicia Fox, which, fun fact, I was in attendance for Alicia Fox winning the Divas Championship at Fatal 4 Way.
Love that.
Yeah, I love Alicia Fox. She was the
I
captain.
do too.
She's like a great character wrestler, and she fit like a glove with the Bellas.
Yeah.
And it was so great to see her get like spotlight whenever she was given that opportunity. But that's
Yeah.
a different podcast for Alicia Fox, or as Noam Dar used to say, Alicia Fox. Yeah. So shout out Noam Dar. Hope you're doing well. But this whole dynamic of Nikki Bella's championship run is still, I don't want to say she lost an edge. It's just she wasn't given an opportunity to be dynamic with her character. She was pretty much the representation, as you said, of that Divas division as it was currently. And then you had Charlotte, who was going to be the representation of that evolution from there on out. And being in that transitional spot isn't an easy place to be, because not only do you have to do it correctly, but you're also not given the credit that you deserve for being the last of an era, because the new era is right around the corner, and then all eyes are on that. And after that, you didn't really have the Divas anymore after Nikki Bella dropped that championship. And then majority of the focus became, after Nikki dropped the championship, it was the lead up to Brie's retirement at WrestleMania 32 in that giant tag match where Nikki Bella came out and she had to get neck surgery because of the rack attack finisher
Yeah.
was just doing damage on her neck. And then of course Nikki came back to SmackDown as a solo act, and she had a fun feud with Carmella, had a nice mixed tag feud with John Cena and with Miz Maurice. One of my favorite promos was Miz acting like John Cena, and he's like, "I gave you a ring, an all new WWE action figure ring," when they were teasing that John
My
was not
God.
marrying
My
Nikki Bella.
favorite promo ever, like that John Cena has ever cut, came from that feud, and is it is when him and Nikki and Miz and Maurice are in the ring, and they discuss the fact that John wouldn't give Nikki kids, and he's like, y'all have been together 10 years and y'all don't have kids, you fire in blanks their sport. uh like 15-year-old me had a field day with that on the internet.
and
uh,
and also it's WrestleMania 33. That's where the match happened, where John Cena proposed to Nikki. That was a big
the proposal that everyone
knew about.
except for her
Yeah,
knew was coming.
and the it's also credited to being the best John Cena Miz WrestleMania match of all time. There's nothing else happened at WrestleMania between John Cena and the Miz in history. I will stand by that. But again, this is where kind of the story of the Bellas kind of concludes, where they were a representation of an era that was already dissipating. And whether it was fairly or not, they got christened with that label. And they were responsible for transitioning from that era to the era of women's wrestling in WWE that we know today. Now, if the
Mhm.
Bellas came in at this point, a time that we're currently in women's wrestling, what is their ceiling in your opinion? Is it the same? Is it different? What say you?
I feel like if the Bellas came into a women's division today, do I think that they would be the face of the division, how they were previously? No. Do I think that they'd do well? Yes. I think more than anything throughout the Bellas tenure, they showed that they are adaptable. They demonstrated that they can learn. And it helps that they're conventionally attractive. It helps that they are willing to do whatever it is to do for the views. Even taking back to what we were discussing earlier, the I hope you die in the womb promo. Nikki's been has been very vocal about it, especially now since leaving the company. She didn't want to say it. She didn't want to say it. Vince said, "You're saying it." So she bit the bullet and said, "Okay. If it's, for lack of better terms, what's best for business, then I'll do it." And I think that is incredibly valuable. And I feel like even if they might not have necessarily been as over with the fans as they needed to be in a current climate, that WWE would have still considered giving them the push. If I had to say, like, who I would compare, who I think the Bella Twins would be similar to, in this era of women's wrestling, I'd say maybe, and I'm not saying like technical wrestling skill wise, I'm saying maybe like an Alexa Bliss.
Okay.
She's interesting when she's out there. We're paying attention. She's not at the forefront of the women's division right now. And she wasn't at the forefront of the women's division before she went on maternity leave either. But she was definitely somebody that we were paying attention to. But I think the Bella's ability to be adaptable, to make the decision about what they think is best for business, and even aside from making a decision that they think is best for business, for the Bella Twins have guts. Taking it back when you mentioned the "Give Divas a Chance" hashtag. We can't. I think we often forget. We combine the women's evolution of wrestling and the women's revolution of wrestling and the "Give Divas a Chance" hashtag. I think we like tend to combine them into one event, which a lot of people credit in the beginning of things, before the term Divas Revolution was, or Women's Revolution Wrestling was coined. We credited AJ Lee with doing the work, with really saying like, hey, there's more to this than just being pretty. We can wrestle too. And then when the term became coined, we credit Emma and Paige with their match for the NXT Women's title, with that. But I think a lot of people forget what sparked that "Give Divas a Chance" hashtag. And not too long ago, I was rewatching the A&E
Biography.
Yeah, biography with the Bella Twins, and what sparked that hashtag was a tag match between Paige and Emma and the Bella Twins. And right before the Bella Twins came out, they pulled them to the side and say, "Hey, cut your segment to 2 minutes. Just want to let you know, we're cutting your match." to down to 2.5 minutes. And they said okay, and the decision was made by Brie and Nikki and Paige and Emma that they were going to go out there, do a finisher, make the pin, and walk back as a statement piece, as in, we deserve more, we are interesting, you need to give us more. And it says a lot. It says a lot when you're willing to put what was maybe a 10-year career of theirs at that point on the line to say, hey, we can do this, we got this. I feel like that says a lot. And that was them at that point, quite literally putting an entire division of women on their back and being willing to carry that. And that's huge. That's huge. And I think, especially now, especially the longer and longer she's not in WWE, the more Ronda Rousey talks, and she talk about how Charlotte Flair did the same thing with her match with, I believe it was Rhea Ripley at Mania. She just put her foot down. It's like, no, we're not wrapping this up. We got this. We're doing great. And the increased respect that Charlotte got from people backstage for making that decision. The Bellas showed that they were willing to make that same type of call. And I think that they would have gotten that respect from the people backstage, and they would have gotten that respect from creative, and it probably would have equated to them being pushed, even though they might not have the technical wrestling skill that a lot of women in WWE do today.
And I think it just goes to show, because Steve Austin said once, you kind of have to be a little bit of an a-hole to move forward in not only the wrestling business, just the business in general. And
Yeah.
moves like that, even though it's not the quote unquote correct thing to do, it is the right thing to do for yourself.
Yeah.
And just kind of standing your ground, standing your business, as the kids say, it has to show a lot to a talent, even though it's not done out of disrespect. Like they weren't just gonna go out there, go overtime, because I know a lot of people do that and be that way. It's like, all right, you want us 2 minutes? All right, we'll give you 30 seconds. Then we'll see what
Yeah.
happens. Gotta twist the arm a little bit to authority. You know what I mean? And that's exactly what they did in that point in time. And they fought for what the women have today. And
Yeah.
that goes to show, like what I was saying about them being more of the transition between the divas and the current era, is that they're never going to fully receive that credit, whether it's, oh, they had the reality show, oh, it's who they dated, oh, it's XYZ. No matter what they were handed, everyone's dealt a different hand in wrestling or just in
Yeah.
entertainment in general. I'm not going to fault them for having a good hand. It's how the business is done, and they were put in a position to perform. And I know a lot of people, especially at the time, they were like, "Oh, the Bellas are going in the Hall of Fame." For first things first, Hall of Fame. It's not a physical thing. It's more of a monetary thing that they do at WrestleMania, just to
Business.
show appreciation, give the people what they want. I believe they were in the 2020 class, and
Mhm.
they were given time in 2021 class because things happen in the world, and they couldn't
Yeah.
do their speech that year. And even still, like, if they were to come back in the ring, whether it's a WWE or an AEW, I believe they're going by the Garcia twins now. I believe
They
Nikki
are.
Garcia is, she's on the USA Network. She's hosting one of the, like a bar competition show.
Armageddon,
Yeah,
yes.
Barmageddon. Yes. And Brie, she's like doing her thing with Brian Danielson, raising kids, being successful that way. And they both have their podcast adventures too. So they can do a lot more outside the wrestling bubble, which is pretty cool. I don't want them to be. There was like a Total Divas, or I think it was Total Divas episode where they were recording their own entrance themes, and you had Jim Johnson, and he's like, "Oh yeah, it's real good," and it was really not.
Hmm.
You know, don't want them to cut an album, but they are talented at what they do, and they could venture off into different things. And I always respect wrestlers who not only can just do wrestling, but can do other things outside of that venture, because there's not many people who can transition into that. And with Bella's, or the Bella twins, excuse me, they have that ability to be a crossover type of performer, which not a lot of people can do. It's usually just wrestling, that's it. But they can have their hands in many different aspects of entertainment. And for that alone, will open the doors up for the women in general, like Stacy Keeler was for a while. And I could tell you that Nikki and Brie were better in the ring than Stacy, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just like, just goes to show, it's like they could come back tomorrow and people would react to them. They're always going to have a reaction, whether you like them or whether you dislike them. And if people have a problem with the Bellas, then I'm sorry, you don't know what the business is in terms of how to attract different audience other than focusing on your own. If you don't experiment and try to capture more audiences with that, then you're just going to stay a niche product.
For anybody who knows wrestling, they know that there are millions
And
of wrestling
millions.
fans
Sorry.
out there who would not be wrestling fans today if Total Divas and Total Bellas did not exist.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly the truth. There are some divas today, who are not divas, women's wrestlers. I have Total Divas on the brand. Uh, and there are women wrestlers out there right now, who credit, people like AJ, Nikki, Brie, for getting into the business. And I think more and more we're going to hear more of those stories. And I can't wait to see what happens in terms of that. But Ebby, it's been a wild ride down memory lane of talking about the
As
Bellas. Where can we find you? What's going on in the life of Ebby?
oh my god, Life of Ebbi. I don't. Where do I start with the life of Ebby? I'm kidding. There's nothing crazy going on. I'm in the midst of wedding planning, which is probably the most like wildest thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like ever. I don't like no one told me like it was going to be this chaotic
Mm-hmm.
and this hard, and like you have so many people's feelings to take into account, and it's just like, oh my god. um
I don't know anything about that.
it's not great. It's the most stressful thing I've ever done in my life. um and it's which is crazy because like I told myself that like I was going to plan my entire wedding before I even got engaged, and I had everything figured out, and I know what I want this to look like and that to look like, and I know where I want to do this and where I want to do that, and I had all of it decided. And now like my mother-in-law actually bought me my actual first wedding planner, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that. So in the grand scheme of things, I actually had nothing
Mm-hmm.
done. I thought I had everything figured out. I really had nothing done. I had nothing figured out. I had all of these abstract ideas, um and it's really really hard to come together. But we're taking it day by day.
Mm-hmm.
We're taking it day by day. I have 25 months before the big day, and it's hard to believe that, like, I just said it the other day to my fiance, like, we've been engaged for 2 months. 2 months has already gone by. Um, like, where, like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do any of this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So like my brain is everywhere. So it is a mixture of wedding planning and creating wrestling content um on TikTok and on Instagram, and I am working on putting things together for a podcast of my own,
Ooh.
which I would love to invite you
Oh,
to,
nice.
Mr. Mars.
I can't deny
Um,
that.
I it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time. Um, I I am a talker, which I'm pretty sure people will figure out while listening to this. I am a talker. I can ramble, and sometimes I get scatterbrained because I know so many things about a lot of different things. It's the teacher in me for anyone who's not familiar with my social media. I used to be a teacher, so I all over the place with all over different things, and um, so I'm really excited to see how I culminate everything together. I finally came up with a title for things, and which is something that I have been. It's really been the hardest part about everything for me. Like, I know what I want to talk about. I know what people that I want on as like some of my first guests, and but like for me, it's like nothing matters if I don't have a good title. If I don't have a good title, and I'm like, whoa, Richie's podcast has such a good title. And like there's other podcasts that I listen to. Like I usually mostly listen to like true crime stuff. But like those podcasts have a good title, and I'm a huge Pretty Little Liars fan, and they have this really cool podcast title, and it's like, what am I gonna call it? What am I gonna call it? And I finally like it came to me in a bubble, like just one of those passing by thought bubbles yesterday morning. So I've decided that I'm gonna call it You're Gonna Want to Sit Down for This.
I'm already seeing.
And I'm really excited. There's not many things that really get me going. Um, but this is something that like I'm gonna stick with this. I really like where it's going. I really like the ideas that I've came up with, and I'm super super excited.
All right, that sounds wonderful, Ebby. I can't wait to listen to your first episode of the podcast when you get it going. And where can we find you for all these updates and all these videos that you'll be making?
You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at 216 bonnet, and it's a bad word, so I'm not gonna say the bad word, but it starts with the B and it ends with an itch. And that is as close to saying it as I'm gonna say. But the in the bad word, the C is an X. It's not a C, so it's not actually a bad word.
It'll be written in the description down below so people can
It
go there.
wonderful, wonderful, because I have tried so hard to abstain from saying a bad word this whole time. I have the mouth of a sailor. There's this meme that I see all the time, and it's like, for any of you who don't know, like I'm a Cleveland girl. I see this meme all the time. It's like Cleveland, where the men are men and the women are also men. I have the mouth of a sailor, and it has been extremely hard to suppress every urge to say a bad word throughout this, but I've managed. And I am proud of myself, unless there was some slip ups that I didn't catch.
I
Um
I'll listen back and then I'll notify you if there's any. But I don't think so. I think we're in
I
the clear.
expect a full report, Richie.
Oh well, we'll see what happens. I'm have a very keen ear.
When I have to text you immediately, a sorry, Richie, just in case. And then my timer is
And
gonna
we're
start
out
over.
of time. No,
And then my timer is gonna start over.
yeah. Hey, you know what? It's never a bad thing. Restraint is good. But that is going to do it for this episode of Wrestling Retold and Relive with Richie Mars. I, of course, am Richie Mars. Follow us on the TikTok and the Instagram at Retold Richie Mars. New episodes of this lovely podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts every Tuesday. TTFN, ta-ta for now, and we will see you next time.